What I did want to really, there's three reasons why I wanted to do this this webinar. One was to really get input. What do you want me to write about? What's really helpful? And when I put that kind of voting thing in Time to Think, and dealing with stress was by far the most popular. But when I started asking questions, everybody had a different view of what stress was. And I suddenly realized I was making this assumption that my idea of stress was the same as everybody else's. So I was glad that that got clarified. I also thought it's always helpful to share stories and find out what's working for other people in the real world. And then I also wanted at the end to get feedback from, how did you find this whole experience of coming and being on this webinar? Do you think it would be useful for me to do more of these on different topics? And if so, when and where? If not, say so. So it was that really, input, sharing, and then some feedback. So that was the sort of plan. And so what I wanted to ask first was test the tech, plus give me some input. On your chat thing, I want to ask you, you know, what does stress mean to you? What causes you stress? And if you can just write it in the little chat box, I'm going to do it as well. What causes you stress? That's what I want first. What does it look like? So, okay. So Deborah, we've got stress means sleepless nights. Barry, children. Okay, so that's the end result, Debs. Yeah.
That's what it means.
That's what you know. That's how you know you're stressed.
Yes.
Yeah? Unable to focus. Okay. Barry, you've got the causes, the children. Okay. Debs, do you know what the cause is when you're not focused or you're having sleepless nights? Do you know what's causing it or not?
Yeah.
Taking on too much work. Okay.
That's the first thing that comes to mind. Too much, not too much work, too much, just taking on too much. And then suddenly I'm awake in the middle of the night with my brain churning around.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. And Barry, I see you've got managing contractors and competing priorities. So that's, again, a lot. Well, for two things. One is a lot of different things to juggle to decide which things should I pick up and when. And then managing contractors, what's that about? What's the stress caused with that?
For contractors, they have a very different set of outcome requirements to particularly the public sector. You know, they bid on providing low-cost services, but promise you the earth, and then you have the problem. They've under-resourced something which to the public service is vital in making it happen. And yeah, and so when you have these competing demands, when you're trying to manage the demands of the public service versus a private contractor and their requirement to make a return, it becomes very difficult. You know, it's part of the outcome of procurement policies and local authority financing, really.
So that's managing what people have promised versus what's been delivered. And what
yes.
You're stuck in the middle of that, I'm guessing. Is that
yes.
Right? Yeah. Okay. So in all of that, I think what some of it has in common is that we're feeling like we're being pulled in two different directions at the minimum, maybe more. One of my friends who couldn't join today, she said, well, I don't know if I'd call it stress because I just don't have any choice. So I've got the kids and I've got the school run and I've got my job and I've got to keep fit and I've got my husband, I've got all of these things. How could I change it? Therefore, is it really stress? So when we had lunch the other day, I thought, oh, good point. So I wanted to, first of all, just show you something and then see if we can start to differentiate. Is there a sort of sliding scale of how you feel and how do we know, Deborah, you started to talk about it, how do you know that we're stressed? So first error is I'm trying to move the slides on and I can't. There we go. Okay, so what I wanted to show you, I don't know if any of you are familiar with this, what's called the pressure performance curve. Has anybody seen this or heard of it? No?
Nope.
Deborah?
I think I might have done. I think I might have done. What does it go into from eustress to distress?
Yes, it does indeed. Yes. So
a long time ago.
So athletes are familiar with this, right? So they're familiar with the idea that in order to perform well, they need a certain amount of pressure. But actually, all living organisms are subject to this. If you don't give people enough stimulation, and you could say that that line at the bottom, that is actually stimulation. It's us coming into contact with something. So all of us need a certain amount of stimulation to thrive. Otherwise, you're in this kind of blue zone. And until you get to the top of that blue zone, you're really understimulated, you're bored, you're lethargic, all of the rest of it. And then you start to get into the green zone. As you start to get into that high performance area, you suddenly, things kicked in, you feel great, you feel better. And that's what's called peak performance. Now, if you get too much pressure for too long, because in some ways that pressure line, the horizontal axis is also time. If that happens, suddenly negative things happen. You get angry or distracted, you might start losing your energy, you get tired and frustrated. And if it carries on, there's stress and there's burnout. And then, as you can see, I'm just gonna see there's a little wonderful, can you see my cursor? When I wave my cursor around, can you actually see it?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Cool. Okay, good. So this line here is what I call the Roadrunner line. It's kind of like flying off the cliff in one of those Saturday afternoon cartoons. And I get a lot of clients who think that they're actually here when they're actually somewhere along this line. In other words, they think they're omnipotent. They think they're flying. Well, they are flying, but they're going to kind of crash. So this is when people feel superhuman here. I can do anything. And the key is to know where you are on this line. And for athletes are not at this top all the time. They perform, and then they come back down and they do lots of really boring, dull things and whatever, and then they get ready again for the next performance. So it's for us to learn from neurophysiology, really, about what's best for us. So sticking here at the top is not possible. How do we go up and down? So what I really wanted to ask, if you see that, I don't know, first of all, if you've got any questions about that. Does anybody have any questions about what I've just said? Before I ask you some questions.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
So there's a difference between pressure and stress, right? There's a difference. If we're in the green bit, we're feeling good. But suddenly, if we tip into the red bit, we're feeling not so great. And I wondered, for you guys, what makes the difference? What makes the difference between being in this green bit and tipping over the edge into the red bit? Can anybody tell me what it's like for them? What's that moment when you know there's too much?
For me, it goes back to what I said before. It's just too many things I've got to focus on. There's too much stuff, too many plates in the air. And it's the final plate. I know what that peak performance bit feels like. I think we all do. And you're juggling all those plates, spinning all those plates in the air, and it feels really good. And then suddenly somebody comes along with another bloody plate. It's like, no, I can't. Or technology lets you down, or something like that. One little thing is often just to cause it. One little thing.
Yeah.
And the whole thing crashes down. That's for me anyway. That's what.
Okay. And how are people aware of what the physical toll is? Can anybody speak to what's going on physically at the time that this is happening?
You end up with those feelings where obviously, anxiety builds. As you start to come down over that curve, anxiety, concern for the consequences, and then what have you got to do to move back into the green zone or good performance start. So obviously you end up feeling tense, anxious, but it's also this, obviously the blood pressure rises. You can feel it rising as performance falls off.
Can you?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And
I was sitting in the office earlier this week with a member of my staff, and suddenly she came in and said, "No, I just looked at the bin delivery chart, and suddenly we've got 120 bins that the contractor hasn't delivered." And yeah, bless her, she's good. And you have to explain to her, one, it's not your fault. Yeah, we'll get it dealt with. But she's concerned about what the director is then going to come in and say and do, because Steve is rightly demanding. He's got plenty of experience. He knows what the public and the politicians want, and he's suddenly going to come down out of the fish tank and lay it on.
So in that, when you say concern for the consequences, this is external consequences, not the consequences of staying stressed for you in your body. Is that what you mean? That it's external?
It's the consequences are you going to have an angry politician or service director come down and start saying, "But I told you in April to get this sorted."
Okay.
And that's actually quite a difficult experience for more junior members of staff.
I
get more concerned. For junior members.
Yeah. And for other people, is that the same? Do you think about outside consequences, or are you thinking about yourself when you're stressed? What's going on as far as what do you think? I mean, otherwise, why is it wrong to be stressed? Does it feel wrong to be stressed? Does it feel bad?
No, actually, being stressed at times is actually quite good. It's that point between when stress becomes destructive and when it is actually a constructive motivator.
Well, that's the eustress thing, isn't it?
Yeah, Debs, I think that's right, isn't it? That's pressure, isn't it? That feeling that you're being pushed to do something that you might not want to do. So I would think, I don't know, but for different people, I would say that your comfort zone is somewhere, in this edge of the green somewhere. It'll be different for different people. But to me, you have to almost be on the edge of your comfort zone to feel like you've got to go, and if you go too far out, or it's beyond your competence, you start to go down. I don't know. It's kind of, because I don't want to really say to people that pressure is a bad thing, because I think pressure is what gets us up in the morning.
Yep.
Do people disagree?
No, I agree. I think I'm one of those last minute kind of people. So because I quite like that sort of pressure, because I do some of my best work under pressure. However, if I've gone sort of, and I'm just on the edge of a deadline, madly trying to get something done, and then somebody else throws another plate in, as Deborah said, that's when I suddenly go, and then apathy sets in, because I can't get everything done, so I drop everything.
Yes.
See, that's interesting. That's because you said apathy sets in, because I've been thinking about it, and I go into a state that I call bunny in the headlights, which is kind of frozen, literally. It's like, well, I don't know what to do. I can't do anything now. It's too much.
That's it.
Yes. So that's what's happening in the brain. So what happens is when we've got too much stimulation or too much pressure, or what happens is we revert to what people call the lizard brain, but the inside within the limbic system, our secondary part of our brain, is the amygdala, and that's the fight, flight, freeze piece. So Debs, that's your rabbit in the headlights thing. Too much stimulation. Oh my God. I don't know if I run to the cave away from the lion, or run towards the lion, or my God, there's another lion over there. And suddenly you just freeze. You literally freeze. And Lynn, it sounds like you'll retreat into the cave and just wrap yourself up in bear skins and hide for a...
I think I just lie down and wait for the lion to come and eat me.
Sounds like a duvet day to me.
But this is what a friend of mine calls playing dead. So
Yeah.
that's another sign that you're you just reached emotional overload. So maybe it's a good time. I'll show you this. Balls, juggling. But actually, this is this rather beautiful diagram that I drew is how I classify our hormones, because we all have them. And these are the different kind of hormones that work in our body. So we've got what I classify as the red hormones, the fight hormones. So you can feel threatened and anxious, but you can also feel kind of brave and courageous and whatever. And this is the adrenaline and the cortisol, and a whole cocktail of hormones. And what happens is these are the kind of hormones that enable us to go and hunt and kill, metaphorically. So they are the ones that get us up, and if we go for a presentation or we do something that requires us to literally go and fight the lion, those are the kind of hormones that work. And so there's those. There's also the reward-seeking hormones, which often people get, those two kind of come together sometimes. Sometimes we want approval, so we will use the dopamine from the reward-seeking hormones, but we will also be using some of the adrenaline and the cortisol because we are also somehow keyed up and feeling a little bit kind of agitated and excited and all that kind of thing. And then we've got the calm and connected hormones, okay? And it's not coming up, but it's the serotonin, the oxytocin, the vasopressin. Those are the kind of connection hormones. So literally they've done research about if you were a caveman or cavewoman, equal opportunities, in the old days, what would happen is that we'd wake up in the morning, and we might hug the wife or the husband, which obviously the dopamine kicks in, and then we'd need to go out and kill something for breakfast. So we use the adrenaline and the cortisol, but we're not fighting the beast the whole time. We come back, we hug the wife and the kids, use the dopamine again, and we have some of the connection hormones about talking together, eating together, sitting around the campfire together. That's the kind of way our hormones work. The problem is in today's modern life is lots of us live in what we call the red. So you're living in this kind of threatened, anxious environment. And some cultures have that. So Barry, I'd suggest that the public sector as a culture are living in red. They are threatened and anxious a lot of the time. And therefore, what that does to people as a group, because we resonate together, our limbic systems talk to each other, and this is what's going on. It can really create an environment of red. Whereas for sustainability, which is why I've done it green, we really need to live and work based in green, which is the kind of feel-good stuff. So some antidepressants work like this. They try and stimulate that serotonin, oxytocin part, or they try and suppress some of the anxiety hormones. And so what can happen is that there's been studies where they've taken senior executives and they've looked at their hormones, and they've looked at what's happened to their hormones as they progress through days, weeks, and months. And the depletion of these healthy hormones that are the green and to an extent the blue. So I don't know whether any of this resonates with you, because actually if we use too much of this up, we do get calm, but we get apathetic. So there's a difference between being calm and being completely lethargic and having no energy. And so I wondered if you guys recognize any of this as a way of understanding how you might feel when you're under stress.
Yes, you can certainly see how that works. The rise and fall of certainly the threatened and anxious, adrenaline through relationships and activities, and you end up sometimes with this one where actually you feel that others are what might best describe as being semi-detached from the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're not engaging with it, and whether that's because they're at a different place to you are, where have they burnt out and moved towards being apathetic?
Yeah, yeah, it could be very likely. And so I've read some research about this is why we still want to take part in meetings, for example, because meetings are trying to get this green stuff. It's about literally, like meeting tables is a substitute for your campfire. So is the dining room table. It's this idea that we come together and we share. And this is part of the research why people still put up with really terrible meetings, because somewhere along the line, at least we're together. At least we're not on our own. At least someone else shares our pain. And that's some of the theory behind what's going on. So the challenge, if we're leading or if we're helping people, like Deb's helps as well, people to change, is that we want those meetings to become more genuinely rewarding, more genuinely connected, so that some of those hormones are activated. Yeah. So for us personally, we can do a lot if we know how to stimulate each of the hormones. So I was just going to show you kind of what you could do, and then just ask as many questions as you like. But oh yeah, so this is so as we're getting to hormones, you're thinking about energy out, which is the giving hormones, the red hormones. You're thinking about energy in, which is the dopamine. It's the selfish, kind of seen as the selfish or the feel-good hormone. And then you've got the connection hormones. And so a guy called Tony Schwartz has written a brilliant book called The Way We're Working Isn't Working. And he says we've got to think about 4 things: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual well-being. And we've got to think about energy in and energy out for dealing with stress. And when I saw these, this became my checklist for whether what I was doing and whether I was actually treating myself very well. So I'm just going to show you the first one, which is your physical energy. So he's drawn a kind of scale here. And he said, you know, there's an active and passive line going north to south and a low and high octane going left to right. And which quadrant are you really living in? So you can see on the left-hand side, that would be my menu for the day pretty much on the left. So that's, you know, caffeine, sugar, simple carbs, not the amphetamines possibly. But I've used up a good supply of my cortisol in the course of my working life. So that on the left-hand side versus lean protein, complex carbs, exercise, yoga, playing and laughing. So I thought to myself, I would really prefer to have the stuff on the right than the left. And then we look below the line and we look at the numbing things. And very sadly for me, who loves my gin and tonic, they've got alcohol at the top and all of the other things that are actually numbing us. Versus the chilling stuff on the other side, you know, breaks, meditating, sleeping, and taking vacation. So how do you feel about seeing this? Because this interacts with our hormones. So energy out on the one side and energy in on the right hand side. So this stuff here, in and out, are our fuel and our brakes. Yeah, so the bottom right hand quadrant is all about getting our energy back in. These are what athletes do, right? They come off court or they come off from whatever they've been doing and they nap. And they have all of this good food and they stretch and they do all the stuff and then they go back into high performance mode. So I wondered about, what do you think to this? Does this which quadrant are you living in?
Yeah, somewhere between the bottom left and the top left.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
interesting actually seeing television down there as something that numbs, because it's interesting. We don't watch much telly anymore, but I do remember one of the things that used to stress me was studying, for exams and so on. And I used to think, oh God, when my exams are over, I can watch telly. But I know that if I hadn't done what I needed to do and I thought, no, I'll have a break, I'll watch telly, actually didn't solve anything, because by the time I'd finished watching the TV, it was still there. The stress was exactly the same, but it just numbed it for a period of time. I never thought about it like that before, but it's true, isn't it?
Yeah. It's passive. So it's about doing things again. If you think about back to the sort of living in the green, you're looking for connected things or things that are giving you stuff. So anything that sort of playing and laughing could encompass a lot of stuff. Playing and laughing. And I think that we could add social media to the television piece. I'm not sure how people feel about that, but personally, I wonder about social media.
Yeah.
I would agree there. Although, sometimes it can be a bit high octane as well.
Yeah, well, it depends if we start having an argument online, doesn't it, really? And then we're killing the beast again, aren't we? Or, I mean, what do you think, Barry? When's it high octane?
It is all about, if I'm looking at my son, he appears to get quite highly agitated at times, sort of within chat groups and things. They can be quite unpleasant, I think, for teenagers in particular. And so I do think on occasions, that the social media, yes, certainly passive and low octane, but sometimes I think it's becomes more active, more towards the spike. And can be destructive.
I think there's a good point there, which actually links to television, funnily enough, because they've done research, haven't they, with backlit screens. So the idea is you shouldn't really look at your phone, your iPad, your computer, anything in the hour to 2 hours before you go to sleep, because I don't know what it is in the light, but it interferes with the melatonin, which is the hormone that makes you fall asleep. So they say you shouldn't really do that because it makes it harder to fall asleep. Because I was thinking the sleeping as well under chill, that's all very well. I love to be able to sleep better when I'm stressed, but the problem is I actually don't. That's one of the things that happens is I fall asleep and then I wake up maybe a couple of hours later and then I can't go back to sleep again.
Yes. That's a very good point. One of the first things I tell my clients if they're stressed is I say, don't take your screens to bed. And one of the signs is that we're choosing to live in the red is that the first thing we do in the morning is that we reach for our screens or our phones before we reach for our loved one. And that's a sign, quite literally, that we're choosing the red dots rather than the green or the blue, right? Because green and blue, that's hugs or something else. If you're lucky. On the other hand, the red, the phone is only going to cause anxiety. It's only going to be a source of bad news in some senses, mostly. So I guess the situation is when we feel stressed, do we make things worse by doing some of the things on the left-hand side?
Definitely.
Could we consciously choose to do things on the right-hand side?
Of course.
And I'm in this big moment because some of you know already, I've got this autoimmune disease, which is a depletion of some hormones. And one of the things that I had was complete adrenal depletion when I was first diagnosed. And all of these things on the left-hand side make it worse. And my doctor actually says, whoops, there we are, printed the next one. My doctor actually said, don't watch television at night. Certainly don't watch the news in the evening. So I started to this is when I started to research this. So this is the second thing that I've clicked through to the emotional stuff. So this is, Deborah, where you started. You said, I feel frustrated, and then we talked about anxious and exhaustion and stuff. So this is our emotional energy. This is at the top. This is high security, and this is low security here. And you've got things on the left-hand side, which everybody talked about earlier on. Then the high performance stuff we've already talked about in the top right. And there's the different kind of high performance, the different kind of positivity, which is just what I would call mellow. But that's where we really can feel connected, but we're not using up as much energy as we are in that top right. So we're again looking to try and be in the right hand column, something we've already discussed, and we might need to use the checklist on the previous slide to help us get there. If we want to feel optimistic, do we watch the news or do we do something else? Do we watch another program? You know, it might mean television, but it might be different television if you want to sit. Or it might be if I want to feel calm and carefree, do I want to go out to that work dinner, or do I want to go and have dinner at home with the kids and the family, for example? So it's about making some of those choices about when you're stressed, what am I choosing? And I know certainly, Deborah, you and Lynn are both also dog people. There's evidence that things like pets, both cats and dogs, extend our life. And one of the reasons they extend our life is that the hormones that they're stimulating are the energy in hormones. So again, that love and connection and calm, apart from when you're shouting at them when they chased a rabbit. But apart from that, right? So that's the emotional one. And then let's finally just look at the mental energy, the self-expression. I see this with my clients a lot. If you look at the bottom left, they tend to avoid and they tend to rationalize and they don't take accountability and they deny that these things are going on and they deny that they're stressed. But what they're doing a lot, and you might recognize this, Barry, is they might be doing micromanaging, not prioritizing, giving too much stuff, or constantly changing course. In fact, this describes a lot of my clients up here.
That describes me pretty much, Moira. When I'm stressed, I say when I'm stressed, that's exactly what I do.
So what we're actually doing, our choices when we're stressed, is we make really bad choices.
Yeah.
So I find that if I can just talk to this with my clients and say, look, at the moment, could you swap one thing on the left with one thing on the right? Mm-hmm. Just take one that you normally choose on the left and choose one on the right and experiment and try it. Now, there's some big ones there about avoiding overload. It's like, yeah, well, no shit, Sherlock, right? This is the big thing. However, giving and getting feedback, not too big. Establishing a goal about what you want to do, not hugely big. Every now and then, at least having a system for prioritizing, at least trying. But I really think that the stuff in the bottom right is where the answers lie. I know it seems weird, but encouraging risk-taking sometimes does more for our well-being than saying I've got to avoid stuff. It almost seems counterintuitive, but if there's things that we've been avoiding or minimizing or denying, whatever that form of risk-taking, that can switch us from being stressed to performing. So it might be that we've been avoiding having a particular conversation with someone, giving feedback. It might be that we've been denying that we have a problem with watching too much TV. So we might try something different. We might go out and take an evening class, or join a running club, or do whatever those things are. Those are some of the things that can help. So one thing out of here to here, one thing out of here to here, or any of those things can be a way of helping with stress. And I don't know whether anybody's tried this without even realizing. Have people actually been doing this without knowing it? What do you think?
Well, certainly, yes, but yeah, you look at some of the aspects of public service, risk-taking in public services. The organisations are very, very risk avoidant by nature. It's almost in in a point of stasis. A friend of mine who's a director at a local authority in East Anglia said, they won't take risks until the pips are really squeezed, and only at that time will they get out of the point of stasis to make the real changes. Again, talking to another director of a London borough, he said, you know what, it doesn't matter that we're spending best part of £14 million on getting rid of rubbish. We're not going to take the moves which you suggest we could do to save a lot of that, whilst we're still in these very expensive offices. They are so risk averse. Risk taking is not encouraged.
That's the kind of playing dead thing that's going on culturally, right? So there's the avoiding, minimizing, denying stuff that you can see on the left hand there, but it's almost like crisis change, which a lot of organizations do. That's the equivalent of an adrenaline shot. I've got to do it now. It's so severe. I almost need the slap around the face to do it. And a lot of change fails because they wait till crisis mode. But sometimes it is actually just, people say, well, what can we do? What can we do to change? And a lot of the evidence is just becoming aware of what actually is happening.
That's absolutely right, actually. That, in fact, I don't know if it's contextualize, but that's what I tried to do. Somebody once told me, oh God, donkeys years ago, and I was stressing about something, and they said, well, what's the worst that could possibly happen? And I don't remember what the situation was, but I know when I'd articulated, well, this could happen, and if that happens, then that'll happen, and that's the consequence. And I thought, oh, actually, it's not that bad. I can deal with it. If that's the worst that could happen, I can deal with that. So that's something I do quite a lot now.
Nice. Any other tips?
I say the times when things are really stressful is actually when you say, well, actually, people may die because of this. Now, that one is stressful. That does cause things.
Yes. I've never had that, Barry. Never had that as a consequence. Not going to lie to you.
That's the problem. See, so a lot of public service, people can die. That could be the end result. But the other thing I wanted to say is that our brains are not able to be, well, certainly the limbic system and the is not able to differentiate between the lion or the saber-toothed tiger and a meeting where your boss might fire you. I mean, it's that at that point for us, it's the saber-toothed tiger. Now, you're absolutely right, Deborah. If you actually said, what's the worst that can happen? Well, the worst that can happen is that he could fire me. That is, in some ways, metaphorical death for some people, right? That is death. So there is a lot of evidence that we internalize what death means, which could be losing a job, it could be losing your promotion, it could be losing your bonus, it could be any of those things that, especially, it is shown to affect men more than women, this I am my job. And then if you lose your job, you lose your life. Yeah? Does that make sense or not? What do you want to say, Debs?
No, it does make sense, Maureen, and I wonder why that is interesting. So maybe that affects more men than women, because my reaction to that is, if somebody was saying to me, well, I might lose my job, I mean, I'm self-employed, so I could fire myself, but I could lose the client. Maybe that's the better analogy. But I mean, I suppose my question then would be, well, if that were to happen, then what? Yeah. So what's the consequence of that? And I just keep taking it to its logical conclusion. Well, if I got fired, okay, that might be a disaster, or it might be an opportunity to try something different. Or, but how would I pay the mortgage? Well, I've got this much, I've got so much saved up for so many months worth, so I have got breathing space. Do you know what I mean? So that even if that metaphorical death, I get fired, were to happen, it's still not actually the end of the world. Do you know what I mean? Maybe that's because I'm a woman and not a man. I don't know.
Well, it's a vast generalization, obviously, because there's a huge population of men, but it's socialized, so that it's still linked to socialization, which is that men are expected to be the breadwinners. So there's a lot that's tied up with social training. I mean, our frontal cortex develops after we're born. So everything that we're experiencing after birth is, and the way that that grows and thickens, is related to our upbringing. So a lot of it's rational. And so what you're doing is you're actually, by rationalizing it, by contextualizing it, not rationalizing it, and talking to yourself about what would happen, you're helping calm your limbic system. You're literally making that kind of uppity, anxious layer in your brain calm down. So they show it in MRIs. In MRIs, they get people to literally talk to themselves, and you see that calming. So they make them stressed and they make them upset, and then they show what happens if you just do the kind of thing that you've just done. But you literally have to do it. You can't vaguely think about the consequences of the stuff. You actually have to say, so what would happen then? And then what? And then what? And it's even more effective if you write it down. Because if you write it down, you're using all the skills we learnt in the frontal cortex. Because writing and reading and motor control are learned skills. They're anything but limbic based. Yeah, because all mammals have a limbic system, but not all mammals can write and read. That's what differentiates ourselves, and that's why our frontal cortex is thicker. So when clients are really struggling, I say, write it down. And that's the evidence. And when I write it down, if I live my own advice, then I do well. When I fail to live my own advice, I do rubbish. And so it is that talking to yourself thing. Really talking to yourself in a good way, not the bag lady kind of talking to yourself kind of way.
I think it's almost making yourself, so if I was telling a friend all of this, what would my friend be saying to me? And it's putting yourself in, so that you're not talking to yourself, you're actually having, you would be giving the same sort of warm, fuzzy, friendly advice to somebody else. So I think that's what I usually do.
Oh, that's nice. Advise a friend.
Yeah. Because
then you're kind, aren't you? I think we're kinder to our friends than we are to ourselves, aren't we? I don't know.
Yeah, most definitely.
I like that. That's a good idea.
So if I were to write a blog post, the main article for the newsletter this month, talk about doing it at the last minute, but anyway, what would you like to read, or what do you think other people would like to read if dealing with stress is the general overarching concept?
You mean in terms of the content, Moira? What would people like?
Yeah.
Probably, and maybe I'm a pragmatist, but I mean, maybe just like we get talking now about different tips from different people, how different people cope with stress. Little practical things like that, like put your friend's hat on, be your friend talking to yourself, for example. That's a really practical thing. Or contextualizing, what's going to happen, and if that happens, then what's the worst that could happen.
I say the writing it down is
that's useful.
It's a very useful tool. I would also say, along with the go for a 5-minute walk.
Nice.
It's quite funny. I could walk around the centre of Romford in about 10 minutes, and that is just about the right time, probably a little bit longer, when things are not looking good, and it's to actually then not make the irrational jumped decision. So the response becomes slightly more considered.
Yeah, I just say in my previous incarnation as a test analyst, test manager, I would often be sitting looking at a problem and trying to solve it, and not be able to, and eventually just not be able to see anything at all, and getting up and walking away and walking around. And then often I would come back and actually find the solution the minute I sat down, because you can't see the wood for the trees when your focus is so narrow. So it's broadening your focus. And also, and I think the other helpful tip is asking for advice, because often, again, in those scenarios, I would have a particular problem, and in actually describing the problem to somebody else, the solution sometimes comes to you. So that those are two of the things that I've used for de-stressing.
Yeah. Something else that I do that I find incredibly useful is, as I can feel the pressure building and then turning into stress, and all those plates, there's more plates, then another plate, another plate, another plate. what I found is the perception is actually worse than the reality. I sense, oh my God, I've got all these plates. So if I make myself write them all down and prioritize, well, not even prioritize, just write them down. What are all these things I have to do? It's just doing a to-do list. Suddenly, once you've written them down, well, it's not actually that much. And some of these are quite simple. And if I just get crack on, I can get that done by lunchtime. And then it's not so bad. So just writing it down, actually, I find it takes away that vague feeling that, oh my God, everything's pushing down on me, when it's actually not.
Yeah, we're coming a lot to the importance of writing it down, aren't we, in some ways? Right. There's another thing it reminded me, same with the writing down thing, is that if you don't have someone to ask, or you feel you can't ask, write the problem down. So it was actually done on a coaching course I went to, and they said, you don't have access to a coach, just write down what you would say to a coach. If the coach says, what would you like to talk about? Write it down. And so I did it, and I thought, oh, that really works, because you see your problem staring you in the face, and it is a bit contextualized then, it is a bit, and then, and you might still need to help yourself. But my husband was feeling very stressed, and I said to him, oh, something I learned the other day is that you write your problem down as if it's I was a coach. And so he went and he did it, and he came back and he said to me, wow. He said, that was good. I said, seriously? And he said, yeah, it really worked. And it was about just seeing it clearer. I guess, like you advise a friend, if we pretend it's not us and we take it out of us, we feel we can see the problem. In other words, we know what the right answer is if we could calm down enough to see it clearly. So that's writing down again. So is that the kind of column that you would find helpful, is more about practical tips for what happens when people feel like they're, maybe the best word is overwhelmed? Is overwhelmed a better word than stress? Or not? Or no different to people? How do people feel about that?
Similar thing to me, I think.
Is it?
Similar, yeah.
Okay. Okay, any other tips that we haven't covered yet? I've got advising a friend, be your friend, contextualizing things, writing it down, going for a 5-minute walk or taking a break, stepping back, any way of kind of walking away and broadening your focus, asking for advice, describing it to someone else. Is there any?
I think one of the other problems which we have is what someone would describe as the snotogram. that email which is sent at the point when things are becoming unproductive, when you're just tipping over the edge, and there's a problem, and it's another problem. And so what you're going to do is, because obviously people are remote from each other, you're going to send them the email. That email which says, it's your fault, you sort it out. If you don't sort it out, the consequences will be. And those emails, which, let's say, a colleague in the private sector describes as a snotogram, are also not entirely helpful.
They're not, but we're in charge of our reactions, aren't we? So, I mean, I would say, of course, I feel like that too, but I somehow think that almost we need to be nannied a bit, but maybe emails should not be allowed to be replied to within 30 minutes. So we're forced to not immediately react, Although I would always say that all of the things that I've just written down are actually solutions to that email thing, which is, take a break.
What I do often is I will write that flaming email, and then I will leave it and go away, walk away again, and come back and read it again. And often just the fact of having written it down, I feel like I've really got it off my chest, and then I can delete the email, or I'll modify it so that it doesn't come across quite as harshly. But I think that's also quite helpful. It's that writing it down.
That's
the
really,
venting.
Yeah, that's really good advice.
The process of venting. It's really good.
Yeah. Well, I found I had to do that because I had a terrible meeting with my GP, which some of you who might have seen this on Facebook, but my GP was incredibly unhelpful, stroke obstructive. And I, in my head, had all the mails that I'd love to write. And so then what happened was I thought, this keeps going around in my head. I'm waking up, talking angry thoughts, saying what I should have done in that meeting. And then I just wrote the letter that I would love to have written. And it's just sitting there. But it did free me from all these angry thoughts that were going on in my head. I am going to make a formal complaint to the surgery, but that's a separate thing from all my anger and angst and not being heard type of thing. So writing it down seems to be the thing. So go on, Karen.
There is one other thing, and I think, and that is not assuming the reaction of the other person. So instead of, it's fine to have that conversation in your head, but often what we do is we end up stressing ourselves out more, because you imagine you're having a confrontational conversation and you're playing both of the roles, yourself and the other person, and you end up getting yourself ready to actually have an argument when in fact you don't need to. So it's about approaching something with an open mind, and not playing both of those parts of the conversation. So it just ends up becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy, really, because you've geared yourself up and you're ready for a fight, and it's hard to come back down from that.
Good advice. Good advice. So as we're coming to the end of our hour, I'm sure people got better things to do than think about stress for the rest of the afternoon. I was wondering what your thoughts were about this experience, how it might be improved, should it be repeated, could I, different topics, that kind of thing. What do people think about what we've just been discussing and how we've been discussing it for the last hour?
This says it falls into two different things. That the first one is the actual what we've been talking about and the purpose, and this is about you being able to put an article together. Is that right? Based on is that right? Because I think if that's the case, this is really good. I've enjoyed it. It's been useful, and I think you're right. You always write good articles, but I think this will be a really useful article as well. So on that side, the other side of this is the technology. And I have to say, this is really an aside. It's got nothing to do with stress, although this is one of the things that stressed me out the early part of this year. I had to run a series of WebEx seminar. And I was terrified, and that kept me away. That was, talk about right off into the zone. I was right into the red. And I got through it, and I learned a lot about WebEx, and it's a fabulous tool. I've never heard of this Zoom, and it's got a lot of the WebEx functionality, actually. I think it's fantastic, and I think this format is with the chat, and the only thing that I've used with WebEx that I don't see here, but maybe you can, and Lynn would know this possibly, is whether the participants can actually contribute on the screen, so we can type, or we've got pointers and stuff like that, and that would make it even more interactive. But phenomenal. With WebEx, what we could do instead of that, you can do the chat, but you could also have a blank screen, and we could type onto the contributions onto the screen, and then you save that as a document.
We can do that. We can do that in this.
Well, this is phenomenal. This is phenomenal, this Zoom.
We have a whiteboard system on this. I was just going to try and show it to you, but it's somewhere in here. Lynn and I were trying it out yesterday. I think I have to get rid of the slides first. But Zoom is a relatively new discovery for me. I would like to think about holding informative, where I try to do two things with this: give you some useful stuff, because I'm thinking you've given up your time, and it would be nice to kind of give you some new stuff maybe that you didn't know. But I definitely wanted to kind of be focused and write useful stuff for people, so that it's a kind of information in, information out kind of creative thing. That's what I was hoping for. And also I would like to just practice it in a low risk environment to see whether I could hold webinars, because I'm like you, Debs, I'm terrified of holding a webinar with this thing. But I wondered whether you think it's useful. I imagine that I might be able to do these semi-regularly through the Time to Think group, but I didn't know times or usefulness or anything. What are your thoughts?
I think it's great. I think it's great. 1 hour, round about lunchtime as well. I think it's good timing. An hour is about right as well. It's not too short. It's not, you can do stuff in an hour, but it's not too long to eat into the day. And I think it's really interesting. I've found it really interesting, and I've enjoyed it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Barry?
I would certainly agree with Debs. You know, it is an easy to engage with technology. This one, and certainly, yeah, the conversations are good. Yeah, they're worthwhile. Yeah, as I would always say, avoid the school run. But no, middle of the day is a good time, good length, and the content is great. And to be able to potentially dip in and out of these conversations going forward, is something to really look forward to.
Okay, good. Because when I started this, my real bad dream that I have, I wrote a blog post saying it's like being naked in public, but the dream that I have, the bad dream I have, is that I will invite people to a party and no one will come. So I decided this risk-taking thing was, well, I'll invite people to a party and see if anybody comes. There's not even any gin and tonic, for heaven's sake. So I wanted to experiment and see whether people actually felt it was helpful, because it didn't really matter. Lynn's drawing madly on the screen there. So
that's actually not even me.
Oh, is that Deborah?
I was messing. Can I just say I was messing about because of the WebEx, and I wanted to see this is better functionality than WebEx.
Brilliant, and it's super cheap, by the way. It's like $150 a year. So I've splashed out on it. I hold all of my online coaching on this now because it's better than Skype, and I think it seems interactive. Like, it feels like you're close to being in the room with me. Certainly, I feel
absolutely
connected.
And again, I keep comparing it to WebEx, but WebEx is a market leader in this type of technology. The audio quality is better as well. I'm using the computer. I'm using the computer because I was late, and I thought, oh my God, by the time I've dialed in. So I did it via computer instead of via audio, and I normally do it via audio because typically the quality is terrible. And this is not terrible at all. It's 4 of us, and it's really good quality.
Good. So all I would say is maybe I would ask you just to leave some feedback in the Time to Think group about this. It would be great if you could, so that next time maybe more people will give up their time. It was very last minute organised, and thank you, Barry, for chasing me up, because it should have been Tuesday, but that's because I was planning to use the Facebook technology and it hasn't been rolled out to my account yet. And it shows you what adversity forces you to do. I found some new technology. So, so are people happy if I also post the video into the group?
Yep.
Are you all right with that?
Yes. Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay, so it won't go anywhere else. It's just in the closed Facebook group.
Yep.
Cool. All right. And if you do leave some feedback and encourage other people, next time we'll have more people at our party. Maximum of 50, which is more than enough.
That's
We need a larger screen.
We do need a larger screen. No slides or little tiny pictures or something. But otherwise, I just want to say thank you, everybody. Thanks for your Friday lunchtime. It's nice to be connected.
It is indeed nice to be connected.
Okay. Take care.
Nice to see you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.